Hey Adam, a lot of Muslims believe that music and photography are haram, completely forbidden in Islam. Is that really true? And more importantly, is there any proof for that in the Quran?
Yes, Omar. And that's because nowadays anyone who grows a beard thinks he has the authority to declare what's halal and what's haram. But Allah makes it crystal clear in many verses that only He has the right to decide what is lawful and unlawful in Islam. Allah said in chapter 10, verse 59, "Say, have you considered what Allah has sent down to you of provision, and you have made some of it unlawful and some lawful? Say, has Allah permitted you, or do you invent lies about Allah?" And in chapter 16, verse 116, Allah said, "And do not say concerning the falsehood your tongues describe, this is lawful and this is unlawful, to invent lies about Allah. Indeed, those who invent lies about Allah will never succeed." And in chapter 18, verse 26, Allah said, and He shares not His rule with anyone. And in chapter 6, verse 150, Allah said, "Say, bring forward your witnesses who will testify that Allah has forbidden this. Then if they testify, do not testify with them, and do not follow the desires of those who deny our verses and those who do not believe in the hereafter, while they equate others with their Lord." There are many more verses like these, all proving that only Allah has the authority to decide what is halal and what is haram. Not prophets, not scholars, not clerics, and certainly not self-proclaimed preachers.
What about those who say that following the messenger or the prophet means Allah gave him the authority to decide what is halal and haram?
These hadith followers have no idea what they're truly following. They claim that hadith explains the Quran, yet the hadith books have created an entirely different religion, one filled with man-made rules of what's halal and haram that Allah never revealed. Following these invented laws is nothing short of associating partners with Allah and His authority. The Prophet never saw these books, never approved them, and never told anyone to compile them. So those who follow them are essentially entrusting ordinary men with defining Islam, not Allah. In fact, when the Prophet once declared something forbidden on his own, Allah corrected him. Allah said in chapter 66, verse 1, "O Prophet, why do you prohibit yourself from what Allah has made lawful for you, seeking to please your wives? And Allah is forgiving and merciful." So no matter how anyone tries to interpret obeying or following the Prophet, it can never mean that Allah gave him the authority to legislate. If Allah had granted him that authority, then logically those laws would have been preserved and protected by Allah, just as the Quran was.
Now that you've explained that only Allah has the authority to declare what's halal or haram, tell me this. Is music or photography actually forbidden in Islam? And what evidence do those who claim they're haram rely on?
When it comes to music, these so-called bearded scholars rely on this verse from chapter 31. "And among the people is he who buys idle talk, lahu al-hadith, to mislead others from the way of Allah without knowledge and takes it in ridicule. Those will have a humiliating punishment. As we've shown in many videos, they take verses that are perfectly clear and twist them to fit their own agenda. The term lahu al-hadith simply means idle, distracting, or frivolous talk. Anything that diverts people from truth or reflection. There is no other meaning supported by the Quran itself. Yet they claim a hadith, attributed to Ibn Abbas, who was only 13 years old when the Prophet died, explains that this verse refers to singing and similar things. That's not revelation nor contributed to the Prophet. That's the personal opinion of a teenager. Even other early scholars, like Ikrimah and Mujahid, interpreted lahu al-hadith differently, saying it refers to false stories, mockery, or speech that distracts from truth, none of which have anything to do with music. This is a perfect example of how these so-called bearded scholars mislead people. They never mention that this interpretation was merely the personal opinion of Ibn Abbas, nor do they tell you that earlier scholars had different and far more accurate explanations of the verse. Instead, they present it as absolute truth and confidently repeat the famous phrase, "All scholars agreed on this." But who actually reads? Who checks? Sadly, almost no one. And that's how blind following continues.
You're absolutely right, Adam. It's really sad that so many Muslims today are blind followers of these so-called scholars. They never question or verify anything for themselves. In fact, they insult us and call us hypocrites simply because we read and check things for ourselves. What about this hadith? There will be among my followers people who will consider as permissible illicit sex, silk, alcohol, and musical instruments.
Exactly, Omar. The problem is no one actually checks the sources. The hadith you mentioned is weak even by the standards of those who believe in hadith. Al-Bukhari did not include it in the main continuous text of his Sahih. He only mentioned it as a mu'allaq, meaning it does not meet his full criteria for authenticity. Ibn Hazm, al-Bayhaqi, and other scholars have also criticized its chain of narration and concluded that it cannot be used as valid evidence. So once again, they are creating laws from weak narrations. What they are doing is perfectly described by Allah in chapter 6, verse 116. And if you obey most of those upon the earth, they will mislead you away from the way of Allah. They follow nothing but assumption, and they are only guessing. In short, any kind of idle talk, whether it's music or something else, should never distract you or pull you away from the remembrance of Allah and your duties as a Muslim. That's the essence of the verse. So listening to music is perfectly fine, as long as it doesn't take your heart away from Allah.
I think we've made our point clear about music. Now, what about photography? Has that also been wrongly labeled as haram? And what proof do the people who call it haram actually have?
Well, Omar, this one's easy to destroy. There is absolutely nothing in the Quran that prohibits photography, drawing, or creating images of any kind. Allah said in chapter 6, verse 119, and He has explained in detail to you what He has forbidden you. But of course, these hadith worshippers always pull a hadith out of their sleeve to forbid what Allah never forbade. They quote this one from Bukhari and Muslim. The people who will receive the severest punishment on the day of resurrection will be the image makers. Honestly, what a ridiculous claim. According to this hadith, people who draw or take pictures will face the severest punishment, worse than murderers, thieves, or those who associate partners with Allah. What an insult to logic and to Allah's justice. These so-called scholars even prohibit you from using your own brain. They've put their own brain to sleep and expect you to do the same. Here's another ridiculous hadith that exposes the absurdity of their logic. Angels do not enter a house in which there is a dog or images. So according to this claim, the angels that record every single action we do suddenly stop their duty if there's a picture or a dog in the house? Yet Allah clearly said in chapter 43, verse 80, or do they think that we do not hear their secrets and their private conversations? Yes, we do. And our messengers, angels, are with them recording. So what are we supposed to believe? That someone can fill their house with pictures, commit major sins, and no angels will record anything? What a laughable, nonsensical narration.
I made the decision a long time ago, Adam, to actually use my own brain. That's how I discovered how ridiculous and fabricated so many hadiths are.
Good for you, Omar. That's exactly what Allah commands every Muslim to do, to read, think, and reflect on the Quran. It's not optional. If you don't, then you're not following Islam from the Quran. You're just following the Islam of scholars.
Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed discovering the real Islam and found the information helpful.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you can continue learning more about Islam directly from the Quran.